No, there ain't no stopping us. Fly without a boarding pass. Couldn't catch me, I'll be moving fast. Call me a shooting star. Let 'em know who you are. Flying up in a bar. Wish on a star. Time to show 'em who's in charge. Call me a shooting star. Didn't even get to cross. I said I'm moving too far. Get to glass. Looking at a shooting star. Got more than a couple of people going mad. I swear they're rooting hard. Tell them I'd be big in the game like she went and got them breast implants. I said I'm moving too fast. Didn't even get a glance. I'm ready to eat up track like I'm seated in a restaurant. If you had swag like mine, you know it's best to flaunt. We aren't hating because you aren't. Shining like it's neon. Rock like kings of Leon. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltrate, I'm with my strategy. When I turn up, then I just have to leave. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltrate, I'm with my strategy. When I turn up, then I just have to leave. Yeah, shoot. Yeah, shoot.
There are plenty of individuals who are inherently malevolent. That's they go into politics.
I just loved that clip there. Yep, and my sound is good. So hello, everyone. I see some people are asking, and my dog's on my foot. He's such a cutie pie, but sometimes he gets in the way. So yeah, this is the one, I think it's from like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I just had a chance to listen to it. It's up on YouTube. I believe it's on Jordan Peterson's station, I don't know, channel, whatever you. I just go through the YouTube recommends, and sometimes I don't even notice where things are at. But it was super long. We're not doing the whole thing. I really enjoyed it, but I enjoyed some parts of it more than others. And yeah, I noticed, Vince says that Jordan Peterson is still surprisingly blue-pilled. And yeah, I think this interview really brought that out. It really contrasted. I know a lot of people like to think that Jordan Peterson is very libertarian. And I've always said he's got some libertarian streaks, but I don't think he's as libertarian as people think. And I think this broadcast really brought it out. And that's not a slam against Jordan Peterson. I like him. Not everybody has to be libertarian. I mean, it'd be wonderful if they were, but I mean, for me to enjoy content, they don't have to be. But before we get started today, it feels weird to me to be talking about anything other than the LNC, but hopefully this is getting back to normal, and we will only be talking about the LNC briefly when there's meetings and stuff, rather than them trying to politically assassinate me. But I don't have it up on my screen. I didn't make the graphic. I'm on a different computer than I normally am. But remember, if you enjoy this type of content, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. Also, for those of you who are so inclined, there are always super chats available, which I am totally grateful for. More grateful than you could know right now, since I am not working. And what else did I want to tell you? Oh, in the show notes on YouTube, because some people have asked me for this. Some people wanted to know how they can help when, you know, they don't have a lot of disposable income. And I get it, because I have virtually none. If you're an Amazon shopper, down in the show notes, there is an affiliate link. You go to that affiliate link, it just pulls up a product. I think it pulls up the Anarchist Handbook right now. You don't have to buy that item. If you start on that page for anything you purchase in that cookie session, it credits to my affiliate account, and it doesn't cost you a thing, and it makes me a little change. So if you are an Amazon shopper, I would really love it if you would start your searches from that link down below. And if you haven't bought the Anarchist Handbook, that is also a very good thing to buy. And also my mailing address is in there, because people seem to like to send me weird gifts to unbox. And I'm more than willing to do that. Without any further ado, let's get started on the content. I'm just keeping an eye on the contents here. Let's see here. And John, if you want to actually say something intelligent, I'd be more than glad to interact with you. But if you're not, well, that's okay. We like trolls. It keeps us very entertained. And you are driving up my engagement numbers. So thank you for your service. Yes, he does, David, he does need to talk to Tom Woods. And I am very much looking forward to the Bob Murphy episode. But let's go forward here. First clip. If I can get that going.
The dominance, let's say, of the three major TV stations from, say, 1950 or thereabouts till 1995, maybe something like that, there was the imposition of something like a coherent national narrative. And now you can object to that, and you should, because in some sense it's imposed. But you know, it's a collaborative imposition between these technologically powerful companies and the government. The journalists couldn't be too corrupt if they chased after the politicians, because then they wouldn't get access, and the politicians couldn't be too corrupt because the media would, you know, disrobe them. But there was this sense of unity, and now you get this immense multiplicity. And so, I mean, you're more anarchically oriented, I would say, temperamentally than I am, but...
Oh, I am an anarchist, yes.
I love that statement. I clicked it there because I love that statement so much. Well, you're a bit more anarchically oriented than I am. I'm trying to be his precise speech. And he's like, yeah, I'm an anarchist. I would say I'm a bit more anarchically, however he said that, oriented. But I also wanted to set up this clip. They're kind of talking about systems of control and the interplay in society. This happened about an hour and 15 minutes into the interview. To be honest with you, the first hour and 15 minutes were okay, but they didn't really jazz me up. The last hour and 15 minutes is what we're going to be concentrating on. So it's interesting, and the way I think Michael really looped Jordan Peterson a few times. So, but I know Jordan also has this very expressive face, so he looks like he might be more perturbed than he is. And thank you so much, TJ Fitzsimmons. Thank you so much. Okay, so that was the setup, but now we're going to start getting into more of the meat.
Right. But you know, there is a danger in fragmentation. That's diversity is fragmentation, but you know, enough fragmentation, you get nothing but endless conflict as people try to work out how they're going to cooperate. So
I don't think that's necessarily true, because I think you're taking it as a given that cooperation is desirable, or that this unity of some kind is desirable. I think what's coming up in certain circles, which I was the first one to posit this in 2015, is in America, at least, the idea of a national divorce. recognizing that we've had at least two cultures since the very beginning. They're being held together through, often nefarious means. And if one group regards Donald Trump as literally Hitler and an authoritarian strongman, which you can very easily make the case for that, and the other group regards, Joe Biden as basically someone sitting in his own urine behind the Resolute desk, there's no reason other than some kind of sense of inertia for these two or more groups to be under the same polity, or both. There's no reason for you to have the president you don't want. And increasingly, as conversation becomes and discourse collapses, because I think social media does tend to drive our ideologies to their logical conclusions, which leads to extremism, which can be both a good thing or a bad thing. It is going to be harder and harder to the point where it's impossible to, have these sort of conversation. And we're seeing it also in Europe.
But there are reasons for the necessity of the unity. I mean, so you talk about Jonathan Haidt in your book, in The New Right. And there's a lot of psychological investigators, myself included, when I was doing research, who were looking into the temperamental basis of political affiliation.
Right.
And so, roughly speaking, on the left end of things, you get the high open people who are creative in their thinking and
yes,
and who are temperamentally in favor of the free flow of information, and tend to be lower in conscientiousness, particularly orderliness.
Okay, I'm going to stop right here. I clipped a bit more of a chunk than I could have dealt with at one time, and I don't know why I did that. But I found it so fascinating. And again, Jordan might have looked more surprised than he actually was. And I want to make sure my sound levels are still okay, because this computer gets very weird. When Michael Malice completely, Jordan said it as if it was a given that unity is always a good thing. And the way Michael nailed it, and this is, to me, this is the essence of anarchism, that unity is often oppression. And he messed up at first, Michael did, where he first started poo-pooing cooperation. That's not what he meant. But this type of unity that Jordan is looking for is very often very oppressive. And I think that is the disjunction between the two. This is the whole takeaway I took from this, where Jordan views himself more as a piece of a puzzle, and Michael does not. And you could take that too far both directions, quite obviously, because in opposition to Michael, no man is an island. But I don't think refusing to say that you have an obligation to be part of some puzzle is claiming that you're an island. It's just kind of claiming you get to make the puzzle you want. And you have no inherent obligation to a particular puzzle just because you happen to be born in that puzzle box. And I believe that's what they'll be getting to. My two dogs are now both here because it's thundering, and they're chickens. So if you see things rocking around, that's because they're scared. So I thought that was interesting. But also what was interesting here was that Jonathan Haidt book. He wrote The Righteous Mind. I've been fascinated with this book for a long time, and the whole idea of political determinism. And I think I once was very... Let me take another sip of soda here. I still have a slight cold with a little bit of a cough, but it's disappearing, rapidly. I used to be very pessimistic about the idea of political determinism, even though I think in my heart of hearts I suspect it's true. And what do I mean by political determinism? I mean we're kind of all hardwired with certain political predispositions. Not meaning parties, but certain values. And libertarians obviously hold liberty as their highest value, but not everybody does. And we find it so hard sometimes to comprehend that they don't. And we work so hard at changing their minds. But if political determinism is true, you can't change their mind. That people are, there might be a fluctuation within their hardwired predilections, but there are boundaries to how much they actually can change. And I used to think if political determinism is in fact true, we're screwed. Because history would show that people who hold liberty as their highest value are in the minority, extreme minority, maybe 10% or less. And if political determinism is true, then we're constantly going to be oppressed by the other 90%. And in one sense, I think that kind of negative outlook is justified, particularly if political determinism is true. But I also have kind of done a flip-flop on that, where I think political determinism, if it's true, may actually be a positive. That if, let's pretend that political determinism is a fact, the fact of political determinism may be driving the next stage of human political evolution, which I tend to predict will be some form of panarchy. And what is panarchy? Well, it's actually, see, libertarian anarchy takes many different forms, and some people view it, and that's why I call myself more of a panarchist than an anarchist. And people, Zena, you need to stop that. If you want to stay here, stay here. Okay. People tend to view it as, you know, the anarchist wet dream is a whole planet that's just an anarchist planet. Well, and by anarchist meaning no state. Well, is that the only vision of anarchy? No, I think panarchy is actually a vision of anarchy. And I started going down this road on Clubhouse last night, where I'd said, I'm starting to accept the fact that not everyone values liberty and you can't change their mind. And as an anarchist, as a libertarian, I certainly believe you have the freedom to not want to be free. I know that's somewhat of a loop, but if you're truly free, you have the right to give away your freedom. Otherwise, you're not truly free. So if I value liberty as the highest political objective, and there are other people who want a certain amount of enslavement, who am I to deny that to them? The problem becomes where they don't want to be free, but they also don't want me to be free. And that's where the conflict comes. And I think the next stage of political evolution is to try to give everyone as much as possible what they want. Why can't we have all of these different models? Zena, you are going to stop that, girl. Go on. Go over to your bed. Go on. Go over to your bed. This dog is so scared. Let me see if I can pick her up, so you guys can see. Look. Can you see the beagle? Isn't she adorable? She is so scared right now. You can sit on my lap. You can sit on my lap. So, yeah, why can't everyone get what they want? If someone wants to live in socialist paradise, why can't that exist as long as they're not imposing it upon other people? And a multivariate, different ways of governance, different models, where ideally where you don't even have to move to, oh, she's shaking, poor puppy. They all want to see you, not me, Zena, so I'm going to put the camera down. Look at the dogger pup. Look at her. Zena, don't be so scared. So, yeah, why can't everyone have what they want? So that's, if political determinism is true, if humanity is to survive, I think panarchy is somewhat inevitable. I would love to know your thoughts on this. This is like the kind of stuff that's been keeping me up at night. So I'm going to go to the comments here a second, and this poor dog. She is trembling so hard. She just hates the thunder. Okay, for some reason, some comments weren't coming up on my other screen. So let me refresh it, because I thought the comments froze. Zena, you need to let me refresh the screen. Here we go. Okay. So, yeah, everyone says, oh, you're such a cutie pie. She is such a cutie pie. She's the gentlest dog ever. Like, wouldn't hurt a flea. Good thing she doesn't have any fleas. Okay, so let's continue now with the rest of this clip, because there was an awful lot to go through right there, so I'm glad I could continue. So let me find the play button with the doggy in the way.
And you have the people who lie on the other side of that, who are higher in orderliness and lower in openness. And I tried to figure out why that was the fundamental political axis, because there's 5 temperaments
Yes.
So why only those two as the major determinants of political affiliation? And what it boiled down to for me is that, and I think this isn't my discovery precisely, but I think it's the most significant discovery in political psychology in the last 50 years, is that it's probably that because borders are the fundamental political issue. And I don't just mean borders between countries. I mean borders between concepts. I mean borders between categories, countries, states, towns, people. The conservative types think you have to hold things together.
Yep.
Because if they dissolve, they die. And the liberal types think, well, wait a second, you bloody well need to maximize information flow. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes one of those perspectives is right for that situation and sometimes the other. And it's I mean, even with, look at the advantages of free trade and then the disadvantage of, a worldwide epidemic. That's a great example. It's like, well, are open borders good? Well, they do facilitate the transmission of disease. And it turns out that the probability that infectious disease will be transmitted in a given political locale is actually a very good determinant of political belief within that locale. So wherever there's more infectious disease, people are much more conservative, and it's a huge effect. So something very fundamental is going on at the bottom of our political thinking. But
okay, another concept brought in there that ties into something else I'd been studying for a while. For instance, if you've ever dealt with bigots who fly under the much more respectable label of race realist or that kind of bullshit, well, they'll often point to how certain areas of advanced civilization arose in Europe under white cultures as if making it a white thing, when actually, if you go back and study on it, it is more luck of resources. For instance, Native America, Aboriginal United States. Most people don't know that horses are not native to North America. Those were brought over by the Europeans. And once those types of work animals, which are what makes advanced civilization possible, civilizations take a broad jump. So the areas in the world that started to develop advanced civilizations had the climate and the resources to allow it to grow. It had nothing to do with whatever particular gene pool happened to be there. It was just luck of biology. But that ties into what he was saying, where he was talking about certain factors, such as if you're in an area where there's more disease proliferation for whatever reason, that the area tends to be more politically conservative. So these outside factors, how they affect our political worldview, again, that's a bit of a challenge to political determinism, isn't it? But to me, I find really, really fascinating. So let me check the comments here, because we really are getting a bit esoteric here. Not everybody likes this sort of thing. I have read The Market for Liberty. And hello, Joy. How are you doing? Yeah, determinism's a very interesting thing. I'm interacting with Joy's comment. And the only reason I kind of am comfortable with the theory or know a bit about it already is because of my theological background. And determinism is a huge thing in Christian circles. The whole idea of, do you choose to be saved or does God choose you type thing? Does men actually have free will? And just interestingly, just to give you a little aside on my theological background, I was a Calvinist for quite a bit of time. And a Calvinist is a determinist. It's a theological determinist, that we were predestined at birth, whether we were part of the elect or not. I'm no longer a Calvinist. I actually have moved into something which is a lot more philosophical. A lot of theologians will poo-poo it because they think it's just too brainiac. And it is something called Molinism, which deals with potential and actual worlds. It was invented or systematized by a Jesuit priest named Molina. If you're a Christian and you've never heard of Molinism, be ready to go down the rabbit trail. Let me give it to you in a very simplified form. And then we'll move on, because I know not all of you enjoy these theological asides. But Molinism posits that God, in the logical moment, not the temporal moment, but in the logical moment prior to creation, envisioned all the possible worlds that could exist. And each of those possible worlds has all these multitude of different futures, which are all predicated, like the butterfly effect, on culminations of millions and billions of decisions. And that by choosing which world to actualize, that is in fact how he predestines. So both predestination and free choice are true. That's kind of the very, very, very simplified version of Molinism. But let's continue.
Having said all that, that also means, that both of those types are necessary, because sometimes one has the right solution and sometimes the other. But even more importantly is that there's no way of getting rid of that dichotomy if you have groups of human beings. And so if we can't have a unity emerge that allows both those types of people to coexist, then what we're going to have as a consequence is conflict. And who knows how severe that can become. So we have a choice. It's like unity, however fragile that might be, or the degeneration into something like conflict. And that's not preferable to cooperation, all things considered.
Oh, I disagree. I think it is comparable, and I don't think the alternatives, I don't think that the unity means cooperation. I think unity means oppression.
Okay, that I kind of led up to that a minute ago. Unity means oppression, and I agree. And to me, that's a radical thought. At one point in my life, I would have been horrified at that, and I never really worded it the way Michael Malice just did, but after he said it, I realized, yeah, that's what I believe. I never worded it that way, but that's in fact what I believe. And if you're not following along, because these are clips that are taken out of a broader context, Jordan is basically saying that Jonathan Haidt's book, even though there were like 5 different kinds of political personalities, they really all revolved to be around 2 extremes. High openness or high orderliness, I think, is the way he put it. And what Jordan is arguing is we need to create a body politic in which both can exist peaceably, and that's going to require compromise and unity between 2 polar opposites. And Malice is arguing, no, we don't need to do that, and that kind of unity is not desirable, that it is in fact oppression. And I agree. And I think that is the this is the political discovery that mankind is coming into now. Like, this is the conversation. I believe libertarians are on the forefront of it. So I see Ofer Nave says he recalls that Market for Liberty ends with an explanation of how establishing an anarchic region result in all of their states collapsing in short time. I don't recall that. It's been a while. I don't read many books. I like reading portions of books and then thinking about it and sussing things out for myself. I'm not the most well-read of libertarians. Most of my libertarian thoughts and philosophy has come through me working it out on my own. It's mostly because I don't have a lot of time. I hope to read more. I don't look down upon that at all. I bought a lot of books. I just haven't read them yet. Marcion says, I think liberty and peace are special and that you can value them without necessarily having to value them as ends in themselves. This is an interesting discussion to have, and I haven't had it in a while. I actually had a huge debate on this. It'll probably come up in my Facebook memories. You know how when you're thinking of something, all of a sudden you see it everywhere? Where I got into a big debate. I value liberty as an end in of itself. So there's disagreement there. But I, as a deontologist, don't view liberty merely as a means. I do value liberty for its own sake. So, continuing.
Well, sometimes you look. I don't disagree with that in some sense.
I'm saying all the time.
That was wonderful. All the time. So Jordan was trying to. Jordan likes to say, well, kind of. He's hedging a lot, and of course, that's not bad. I'm not saying he's a waffler, because reality tends to be a little fuzzy. Like I say, there are very few angels and demons. Everything's kind of a little bit. But I think Jordan does it a little bit too much. So he was kind of go, yeah, well, unity can be oppressive. And Malice is like, no, it always is. Was he doing that to be a little bit provocative? I think so, because I'm not so sure you can defend it always is, maybe. But I think I think Malice is much closer to the truth than Jordan is.
Unity through politics always means oppression, because the political system can only be used to silence people and force them to do what they otherwise would not want to do. Otherwise, they would do it on a voluntary basis. So any of these calls of unity, in my view, are always sleight of hand to marginalize or oppress a certain population.
Okay, he clarified it. Now I do agree. Unity through politics is always oppressive. I would absolutely agree. And so he wasn't saying unity is oppressive. I don't like this brush. This brush is, well, let me just dab this on and then I'll blend it out, because this is this brush isn't doing a good job, is it? But it was a clean one I had. I need to go and clean all my brushes. People have asked why I have many brushes in the background, because I don't like cleaning them every day. So I like having a lot, and then I just go clean hundreds of them. And some ladies go, clean your brushes. Yeah, you gotta clean your brushes, huns. That's something you gotta do. There's actual brush cleaner out there, and I do it. It's just, I'm lazy. I don't like doing it every day, so I do them in batches. Okay, that's not so bad anyway. I'm gonna go, I think, for like a dark purple smoky eye type look. So yes, unity through politics is always oppression. I would agree. Let me take a look at comments here. Elastic Giraffe says, I don't think Molinism can escape the charge of environmental determinism. Well, it is a form of determinism. It is preferable to Calvinism, yes, in my view. Usually, the biggest objection against Molinism is the grounding objection. But to me, when you start dealing with first causes like God, I think all those objections fall away.
Now, sometimes that's necessary.
Like classic postmodernism, that postmodernist, that's the fundamental claim of the power theorists, the French power theorists. And there's some, that's not an insult, by the way.
Sure.
But look, if you take 10 kids and you have them play the same game, all the kids get to play the game, but not all of them get to play the game they wanted to at that moment. But at least they all get to play a game. And so
I wanted to stop there 1 second, because a lot of people got triggered by the fact that Jordan just called Michael Malice a postmodernism or a holder of some form of postmodernism, which has become a very, very dirty word in libertarian circles, at least, or at least certain libertarian circles. But Malice didn't seem to take offense at it, or if he did, he didn't show it. But I'm going to show here where I disagree with a lot of people who are in my political circle. Particularly, I would say a lot of people in, say, the Mises Caucus. Which is why I laugh when some people out there say, oh, they only accept you if you're a social conservative. And I think it would go even beyond social conservatism. It would go to Western civilization preservationist or something like that, which is what I think a lot of people mean when they're calling people paleos or conservatives. They're merely meaning people who value the structure of Western civilization, which is most people. I'm sorry to trigger you progressives. Now, however, though, I differ in that way. Somewhat of a lone wolf, perhaps, and this is probably why I've always said I'm left of center. I'm a deconstructionist. I think Western civilization has served us just fine, but I don't idolize it, and I see a lot wrong, and I don't mind deconstructing the whole damn thing and building it back up. I am, in that sense, an outlier. I am a radical deconstructionist. I do not automatically presume the nuclear family is best. I do not automatically presume the certain structures that we have that we're so used to in Western civilization are best. I just don't. I actually can envision family structures that I think would be superior to the nuclear family. And in paleo, quote unquote, circles, that would be anathema. But I am accepted just fine. So much for that. But I think that's kind of what Jordan is arguing for here. And Malice hasn't called himself a deconstructionist, but I'm hearing that in what he's saying. I'm certainly seeing myself reflected back in what he's saying, and I certainly am a very radical deconstructionist. Oh, come on now. Why didn't it move to the next scene?
Okay,
Correct.
so, and I would say that we are cooperating, we're also competing, and we also might be tyrannizing each other to some degree. But there's something in this mutual interaction that we're about, that we're engaging in voluntarily, that is cooperative, and that isn't being enforced by some external agent.
Right. It's entirely cooperative. This is my whole point. This is why I'm an anarchist, because this is when people are doing things voluntarily, they are going to choose the things that are preferable to them. The problem, and when you have conflict, is when you have a third actor coming into our conversation and being the state and forcing both of us to do something we would not want to do for their sake. And that, when you play that out, that game on a national, international scale, that is the definition of oppression.
Absolutely agree. He's getting to the root of political problems, the problem of political authority right there. And I don't think yet Jordan sees it. Or if he sees it, he doesn't have the individual is, you have to be, believe in the supremacy of the individual to be able to follow Michael's argument to its logical ends. And you also have to value consent far higher than even, progressives think they're all about consent culture. No. The biggest valuers of consent are anarchists, at least libertarian anarchists. And that sometimes is a shocking discovery for some people.
Instead of you and I having a podcast, why aren't we in the factory making socks for poor people? That's of more utility, says the third party who's not involved here, and that's the danger in my view, and the legitimacy of that kind of third party.
It is so. The developmental. I picked up a reasonable number of my ideas about the relationship between games and morality and higher order social structures from the developmental psychologist Jean Piaget. And he was interested in the science of ethics, essentially. And his goal was the reunification of science and religion, actually, and although very few people know that about Piaget. And he pointed out quite clearly that a cooperative game would outcompete a tyrannical game over time, because the tyrannical game had to waste resources in enforcement, whereas a cooperative game didn't, because people were voluntarily going to go along with it. So then you say, well, I think you can make a perfectly credible case that if you could choose between two games and one of them involved force and the other didn't, and they had the same end, let's say, that the cooperative game is to be preferred, and it's also more sophisticated. But I would say as well, we actually don't know how to pull that off. Some of it's just lack of ability. Well,
okay, yeah, we don't know how to pull that off yet. But to me, I just heard what Jordan said, and no disrespect, but I kind of just went, well, that was words. That was a lot of words. And it seemed to be a way of dancing around what Michael said, because what Michael said is very, very basic. But I didn't really hear Jordan deal with it. I'm going to look in comments, see if anyone disagrees with me here. So, Charles Stewart says, unity through political process is not oppressive if consensus has been achieved in the community in which that political process has been invoked. If consensus, meaning cooperation and voluntary agreement, has been achieved, that is not the political process. That's just merely agreement. The political process is inherently oppressive. If people wanted to do it and could agree to do it on their own, politics would not be necessary. Any plans to visit Texas before next May? Probably your convention. I'll be campaigning. So I try to hit the biggest conventions in Texas. Obviously, everything's bigger in Texas. And David Burnham. Oh, you're very welcome, Charles. It's better to live in a state of AC. I don't know what AC is. I know I'm feeling really dumb. Like I probably should know what that means. AC. And sure, Charles, these comments are for people to explain. David, if you could explain that, I will go through that. But let's now go on to the next quote or clip.
When you integrate so many people, like you have 330 million people in the United States, it's really hard to organize a cooperative game.
Well, that's the role of the corporate press. The corporate press puts forth the agenda of the power class and gets everyone persuaded to do that which they had wanted to do. Mario Cuomo, whose book I got paid, Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, whose book I got paid to read, he said explicitly in his book that if this wasn't done through voluntary compliance, I wouldn't be able to pull off half of this. And what is allowed to happen is you have decentralized enforcement of these rules. And we saw this during the lockdowns where every low status person had an opportunity to assert dominance over somebody else by going up to them and yelling at them that they're not wearing a mask, even though going up to them ostensibly is going to put your life in danger. And you made a very cogent point about how persuasion is a lot cheaper than force. A lot of people use all these Orwellian 1984 comparisons, and I think the comparison to contemporary terms is much closer to Brave New World. And it's through the use of pleasure and the carrot, because it's a lot cheaper to persuade people it's in their best interest. Go along, you're going to give up your freedom, but I'm going to give you safety. And they'll be champing at the bit to do that. H.L. Mencken, the great cynic of the early 20th century, said that the average man does not want to be free. He simply wants to be safe. And for those of us who are fans of freedom, who regard liberty as a high value, the issue is, how do you engage in a polity with people who don't really find liberty of use and would rather have every minute of their life, whether through their corporate job or what they watch on TV or what they wear, pretty much decided for them.
He nailed it right there. And let me try to get this wing on. I always have trouble getting it even. Yeah, even enough for government work. So yeah, if you take someone like myself or someone like Michael Malice, where liberty is my highest political value, any infringement upon that is an oppression to me. And some people prefer to have less liberty and more security. How do you square that circle? That is, in fact, the issue. It's the fundamental problem of political authority. So, let me look here. Oh, anarcho-capitalism, David Burnham says. So, let me now go back to your question now that I know what AC is. It's better to live in a state of anarcho-capitalism where we're free to choose and vote through the market. Agreed. That is, in fact, what I advocate for. But Elastic Giraffe says he thinks libertarianism is compatible with the democratic process. It depends on how you're defining democratic process. It's compatible with the democratic process if I have A, a choice to opt out, and B, knowingly chosen to have some of my decisions made by other people who just happen to be on the more numerous side of a question. But that's not actually the democratic process. That's a form of it. The democratic process, at least in politics today, there's no opt-out clause. You just live in a democracy and you accept as your urban myth that the sanction of more people than not makes something acceptable to do. Well, I completely categorically reject that. I don't view democracy as a good. I think it's better than monarchy, but all in all, I think democracy is evil. With that hot take, let's go over to here. And Charles, I'm not bringing, I'm very, excuse me, very familiar with actually Roman history. It's kind of my fetishes. I'm meaning political process and the most simplest of definitions, where certain people, through whatever process it may be, are subjugated to another group of people. Because if there isn't subjugation involved, it's not politics. There's no politics involved. It's just living life and being cooperative. When I agree to do something for somebody in exchange for something else, that is the market. That is not politics. Politics inherently is about power over other people. You don't need to have power when people have agreed. See, everything you brought up there, Charles, it's still politics. I don't think we need to get, I'm a paralegal, by the way, so I'm pretty familiar with the history of law and the history of legal tradition, and I don't think that still escapes the fact that politics is inherently about oppression. Politics is oppression. And Marcion, yeah, liberty does imply the liberty of giving up liberty. Again, to bring in a Christian example I like to bring, people like to point to certain limitations that Jesus had in his earthly life and said, well, how can he be God? But they don't understand the doctrine of kenosis, which is as God, he was, he voluntarily set aside certain prerogatives of his Godhead. And you would think if you are God, shouldn't you be able to do that? And in a mini way, I'm not trying to be blasphemous here because we obviously aren't little gods or anything like that. But if we want to put that on a human sphere, if what our ultimate quote unquote power is our liberty, then certainly if we're free to give up the free.
Then there's the separate issue of what responsibility you owe your polity. And so, and maybe none, you could make that case, but I want to address that. But in any case, let's look at the elite institutions in the United States and what's happened to them over the last 40 years, for better or for worse. So I know how this worked. So 100 years ago, Harvard, Yale, the Ivy Leagues, they were essentially aristocratic institutions, and you were in them as a consequence of birth. Okay, by the 1960s, that changed, and it changed to IQ-based meritocracy.
Okay, I want to stop here for a second because I don't want this point to get glossed over. And I'm actually liking this somewhat minimal eyeshadow here. I tend to go for the overly dramatic, but I'm liking what's going on here. Excuse me, I wanted to make sure my mute button wasn't on for my cough. I do need to cough 1 second, so let me mute. Okay, I'm back. Michael snuck it in when Jordan said, what duty or responsibility, or I forgot he used either of those words, but that's along the same lines. Do we have to the body politic? And I agree with Michael, none. And there is the fundamental difference. Here, Jordan is sneaking in something that libertarians fundamentally reject, the social contract.
Okay, the SAT is an IQ test. Now, people swear up and down it's not, but that's because they don't know anything about IQ tests.
Right.
So to make an IQ test, all you have to do is draw 20 random questions from...
Oh, and I do have to stop one there a second, too, because there's another analogy. Jordan is making the social or cultural equivalent of Barack Obama's "you didn't build that." And he's claiming we have some debt of obligation or debt of gratitude to certain systems that may have been in place in the past that gave us certain benefits today. Libertarians very rightly chafe at the whole economic "you didn't build that." But for some reason, we're not understanding the cultural "you didn't build that" is just as erroneous.
Set of abstract questions, sum up the right answers, and rank order them across the population. That's basically all an IQ test is. It's that powerful. An SAT is an IQ test. Now, increasingly at the elite levels in the universities, IQ is the determining entrance requirement. And the average IQ of people in the Ivy League schools has gone up precipitously since the early 1960s, when it wasn't much higher than average. And now it's way higher than average. And now you can debate about whether or not that's a good thing. That's a separate issue, but that is what's happened. And the reason, there was a bunch of reasons for that. I mean, one was the realization that IQ is actually the best predictor of success in colleges. It's not that good, but it's 5 times as good as the next best predictor. And it's also relatively fair in that your SAT scores are, they're a better determinant of your success in university than which school you graduated from. So a very, very bright kid from a very bad school has a reasonable shot at Ivy League admission compared to, say, a very bad student at a very elite school.
Yeah.
So there were socialists who were pushing the use of IQ as well as people who are more conservative. But in any case, there's no conspiracy at work there precisely. There's a decision on the part of the institutions as a whole that it would be better for the elite institutions to be based on merit as assessed by IQ, and that overall that would be better for the general population because hypothetically having smarter people make decisions, because they can make decisions using more information, is better for all concerned. And so there's a lot more going on at the upper ends of the elite institutions, let's say, than the mere conservation of multi-generational power. There's a positive element that I think is overlooked in a way that looks to me like the shirking of responsibility in revolutionary movements like those even that are spawned off of 4chan or that characterize anarchism. It's like, well, what responsibility do you have to what it is that's brought you to the point where, for example, you can have this technology-mediated conversation with me? Criticize away, but like, where's the emphasis on, where's the positive contribution and perhaps even the gratitude?
It's in the toilet where it belongs.
I love Michael. It's in the toilet where it belongs. I love him so hard. Because he doesn't play these games. We play these games with each other. But I also wanted to note something just within our own little sociology here. You notice the troll we had on here earlier? Who just was taking stupid little snipes at me? Where he was perfectly happy to do that as long as the conversation like didn't get too deep where we could just say stupid shit like resign. But the minute we started getting into like actual meat, they disappeared. Just saying. Draw your own conclusions from that. Thank you so much, Drywall O. It is so appreciated. Now one of my dogs is trying to get past again. I've got like a little door here. Go on. Are you stuck? You're so fat? Oh my God, my fat little dog is stuck. Hold on. What are you stuck on? Go on. There you go. Oh my goodness. He got wedged between this little door and the bed. He's a little dachshund. Charles, if Michael seems like a bomb-throwing, chaos-promoting anarchist, you probably would end up thinking the same of me, but I hope your opinion would change over time. I know Michael's views, and views like mine, can seem a little off-putting at first. But those are the views that I have. But I'm a pacifist, so you never have to worry about me throwing a bomb. I'm a religious pacifist in the Mennonite tradition. Let me take a look at some of the other comments here. I need to get my cursor. It's a second screen. Here we go. Let's continue. Hello, Julian. Yeah, and Charles, I do know that the soda is bad for me. It's my vice. I drink about 8 of them a day. It's just the way it is. I don't do drugs, but I do my diet do. Elastic Giraffe, I don't think a rights-respecting democracy is actually a democracy. Because I think democracy, by definition, is the oppression of the minority. If the minority fully agrees to be oppressed, then it's not oppression. And then I'd say it's not democracy either, because the vote isn't then a political process. It's just a decision-making process that everyone's already agreed to ahead of time. Fully accepting that the outcomes might not go their way. Democracy is something, to me, that's imposed from the outside. And we can tell that it's against the will of most people, even in this country, because of the fact that every 4 years you got a whole group of people who say, not my president. Well, if they were all consenting to this democracy, they would just go, my president, this is the system I agreed to. But they don't. I don't really think the closest to a rights-respecting democracy that there is voluntary organizations like, say, the LP, where we elect people at convention. And you could just leave because it's not an overarching body politic over your life. Okay, so let's continue.
I mean, I reject totally the idea that somehow we're on Zoom right now. I've got a mic from, I don't even know what brand. What I owe them is the cost that it paid me to buy their product. And what I owe you is to treat you with, which isn't much of a cost at all, with courtesy, dignity, and respect. Anytime people start talking about duties and responsibilities and gratitude, that's them invoking the unearned.
Well, wait. No. I don't think it's that cut and dried, even in your formulation, because you said
it's my phone. Well,
you pay for it, and fine. I'll leave that be and say that's a perfectly acceptable answer. But you did say that, that you believe that you have a moral obligation to what we're engaged in right now, right? You said you're going to treat me with, you said 3 words: dignity, respect, something else.
Courtesy, yeah.
Courtesy. So you do recognize that there's an ethos that should govern our interactions.
No, I think you've earned all those things. I don't act that way toward everyone.
That's fine. I have no problem with that. But I'm not trying to undermine your argument either. I'm really curious about this issue of responsibility, because I pushed it a lot, and I've tried to figure out what response. So look, from my perspective, I would say, well, your thought centers on the tyrannical element of the Great Father, and yes, fair enough. That's a major existential concern.
Okay, I'm stopping it right there for a second, because this is what I don't like about Jordan Peterson. I don't believe that all of life is explained in archetypes. The tyrannical aspect of the Great Father. dude, you don't need to make things so, like, hoity-toity. That kind of stuff. If you're dealing with literature, which particularly great literature that is specifically written in an archetypical manner, yes, then you could start dealing with the Great Father and all that shit. But when you're just dealing with some dude living his life, please spare me the Great Father stuff. And here's where I'll disagree with Michael Malice, but it has nothing to do with my anarchism. It's something that I'm bringing into it. Where he says he treats Jordan with certain, dignity, respect, whatever it might be, because he feels that Jordan has earned it. I will differ on that. But again, not coming from an anarchist perspective, but coming from a Christian perspective, where I do feel a moral and ethical obligation to fellow human beings as image bearers of God. And I can't even envision not having that foundation. So on this part of the conversation, I don't relate particularly to Michael Malice because he is coming from an ethical principle, at least as far as I can tell, divorced from any kind of spiritual belief. Though I do think actually the belief in the inherent natural rights of man is a type of spiritual belief. And if you do believe in that, you do have to believe in some kind of fundamental form of human dignity that I think through a much more complicated process than I just laid out would cause you not to say you treat people with dignity, respect, etc. because they earned it, is you treat them that way until they forfeit it. I find those obligations to fellow man to be the default, where it seems like Michael is viewing the default to be a nothing, a blank, and you can either earn good or earn bad. In my view, you start out at the pinnacle. You can descend from there. But that's just a philosophical, probably even more of a metaphysical difference between us.
In terms of problems to focus on, it's a major problem. It's not the only problem, but it's a major problem.
Okay. I could have just let it play through. I didn't realize it had so little. And I am liking all of these colors. Ladies or guys, I'm liking this. This came out good. So let's see. Over to comments. I don't have my trackball. That's why things are so awkward for me right now. And Nisalaris, I was a Molinist, went to Calvinism, went back to Molinism. Just FYI. Personal experience. Okay, and I kind of agree with you, Elastic Giraffe. Some Calvinists will laugh because I do think some of my objections on why I left Calvinism was emotional, but I don't think emotional is bad. Like a lot of people will put down people's arguments by emotion, but we are emotional beings, and if something sits so badly in your emotional core, as Calvinism did with me, I do think that bespeaks a problem with it. So I tend to agree with you. I did find it just very, very disconcerting and not something I could particularly live with. David Burnham, when are we going to hear a decision from National on the next chair and the body to be elected to investigate the new? The investigatory committee has already been appointed, and I have zero faith in it because one of the 3 members is someone with an open vendetta against me. Anyone with an open vendetta against anyone who's at all involved in this whole thing cannot be impartial. So the LNC had zero interest in appointing a neutral body because I told them these concerns when this person was nominated, and they didn't care. And also, we would have hired somebody from the outside. You know, this is like the police investigating themselves. I am sure they will find we did nothing wrong. So, continuing.
You know,
Sure.
you could focus on the evil in your own soul. You could focus on the catastrophes of the natural world. Well, those are valid, large-scale domains of concern as well. But for me, it's like, okay, well, there is the tyrannical aspect, but there's the aspect of culture that, well, that you have enough food to eat, and that you have heat, and that you're the beneficiary of the structure that you're criticizing. And you could say, well, my criticism is making the structure stronger, but there's this element in your book and in the 4chan culture and so forth that seems to have this, like, it's this random destructiveness that looks to me, it's not driven by something that's going to be clearly spoken of, and it's not driven by something that's aiming at a good end.
I think it's aiming toward a more honest end, because very often we're told things like, this person's a hero, that person's a hero, they should be valorized. And even if that conclusion is accurate, you know, who are you to tell me that I need to valorize that person? I mean, one thing, it's like showing versus telling, like good writing, right? If you tell me this person has this accomplishment, that accomplishment, the natural, rational response is, this is a quality person, and we need more. I would love it if there was a world that had more people like this. But if there's so many outlets, more than you can count. Greta Thunberg's a great example. You have some random high school dropout who won't go back to school until literally everyone on earth changes the weather for her, and Time Magazine is calling her Person of the Year. I think to have that undermining of Time Magazine.
Okay, that I thought was very interesting there as well. Jordan's really pushing well, you're the product of the systems you are criticizing. Therefore, you owe those systems something. Well, we're the product of both good and bad things. You know, I'm the product of an abusive marriage. And that did make me who I am today, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily something that you owe a gratitude to. I think it's perfectly reasonable to re-examine everything all the time. And that there's nothing, see, what Jordan seems to be applying without saying it is that there's some things that are sacrosanct. And I simply do not believe that. And I also do not believe that we just happen to be, in the relatively short history of mankind, have stumbled upon the most ideal things that just cannot be touched upon, or you must build upon this without starting over. I simply do not agree with that. And that's because I believe in the supremacy of the individual and not in the supremacy of the institution or the culture. To answer David, yes, the names of the investigatory committee are public. I'm not saying them because there's two people on the committee who, as far as I'm concerned, are completely impartial, and one who's not. And I don't want to say all three names and then not say who it is that I have an issue with, which will kind of then maybe cast suspicion on the names of the people I don't have a problem with. So I just prefer to keep it vague. People can figure it out if they'd like to. And Charles, I think you have in your head what you think people who disagree with you must think, because you couldn't be more wrong. I am deeply, deeply steeped in the common law. Again, being a paralegal and studying the history of law quite a bit. I think you're being presented with a worldview you're not terribly familiar with, and you're trying to put it into categories, and you don't yet have the categories for them, just to say. But to me, wherever my views came from, they could have been pooped out by a rabbit in my garden. I don't care. To me, they are true. and the source of them is not particularly of interest to me. Okay, let's see here. Let's continue.
You say they, and the they contains the enemy in some sense. And so my question is, well, exactly what is the enemy, and who is the enemy, and where is it exactly? And
Harvard Yard, the New York Times offices, and Congress and the White House.
And corporations?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, where isn't it?
It isn't right here, you and I.
Okay,
it isn't
why?
when...
Why?
Because,
why right here and now? Why isn't it here right here and now?
I'll tell you why. Because neither of us are doing anything other than presenting our own perspective. We are letting people agree with us or disagree with us from their own choice. It's not going to matter to me or to you whether someone agrees or disagree. You're speaking your truth. I'm speaking mine, to use a cliched expression. And at the very least, I hope that people are watching this and being entertained and having their thoughts provoked.
Okay, yeah, Jordan got a bit aggressive with him there. And I think the aggression was born out of a bit of frustration that he doesn't know what to do with Michael's views. And I happen to agree with Michael's views that today, what we are under today is the tyranny of the controlled media and corporations who are directing people in such a way that the people almost think their choices are free. But we're being told what's the accepted narrative, what's the accepted style, what's the accepted opinions. And boy, do you get punished when you go outside of those. So I agree with him. He said, who is the they? I think he identified the they. Those are the power brokers. So I find libertarians extraordinarily naive when they see corporations as strictly private matters. I don't think corporations are libertarian in the slightest. And I certainly don't see them as sheerly private actors. Corporations are not people. Continuing.
I agree with you completely that we should be skeptical of people and their motivations. I do not agree that if someone is nice to their family, I have no doubt that all these politicians adore their family, that they have genuine concerns, that I'm sure they said they want to make the world a better place. If you are comfortable using force to send armed men to harm innocent people, I don't care if you're nice or have good motivations. You're a bad human being.
Now that's the tough pill to swallow. And I will readily admit that I even have problems saying that. And I get, when I hear someone else say it so bluntly, I do get, because I know a lot of nice people that are statists. But are they? Ultimately, when it comes down to it, are they? I think the way around this is the same way I get around when people ask me, is so-and-so a libertarian? And I say, people aren't libertarian, ideas are. So I think if we stop viewing people as the cumulative, they're more than just the cumulative bundle of their ideas. And there's something valuable in and of themselves. So you can see something nice and good and noble in a person, even though another part of their life, they're not good people. And yes, by that metric, everyone who thinks it's legitimate to go and vote, and your vote might take something from me, but you somehow think it's okay because you got more people to agree with you, no, you're not a good person in that act. But I'm not going to say that bad act has thoroughly infested your entire being so that you generally are not a good person. But your political personage is bad. He's absolutely right. There is nothing noble about thinking you can go pull a lever and steal from other people, that you can go and pull a lever and decide what people can put in their bodies. That is not good. That, in fact, is the essence of evil. In fact, I have more respect for the person who will go and use the force themselves than someone that will walk into a voting booth to get some other paid goons to do it for them.
And I got to tell you, there's lots of things you could say positive about her. You know, that's very easy. She's made something of herself. But it's Time Magazine that's far more of the target than her. It's these agencies that presume to tell me who I should respect and value. And it's not on my terms. It's on their self-serving terms. You don't need to tell me that Black Lives Matter. I know this. I'm from Brooklyn. And you don't need to tell me literally every 5 seconds. And only we decide all together that they matter this month. And then next week, it's going to be gay history. So trans lives are going to matter. Then we go back to Black Lives Mattering. It's
okay,
like,
so what? Fine, look, fair enough. You know, that's a compelling sequence of statements. It's like, what is it exactly? I'm not being smart. I mean that.
I that's something I would say when I am being smart. So that's why.
Okay. No, well, but I'm.
That's a compelling series of statements. That is such
I'm observing it.
I love him. He's so cute. I am in love with Michael Malice. He's just so adorable. That's a compelling sequence of statements. It's like me saying, well, those were words. Lots of them. In order. And speaking of order, I did those clips a little bit out of order. If you know, it went from Greta Thunberg to political violence makes bad people to back to Greta Thunberg. Sorry about that.
And one of the reasons I am an anarchist is I do not feel comfortable forcing another person to live as I see fit. I just think, you know, who am I?
Yes, well, I think that's an admirable moral principle. It isn't obvious to me that the logical conclusion of that is anarchism, I suppose. That would be my objection. Okay. I mean, and I do believe that degenerate power structures exist and they use deceit, and that's reprehensible and should be fought in every possible way. I mean, my sense has been that there isn't anything more powerful to fight that than spoken truth.
I agree. And humor.
Well,
because
humor,
they're using,
it's very rare.
Okay, I'm stopping that there for 1 second. Because Jordan said he thought what Michael Malice said was noble, that he doesn't see who am I to impose my will upon other people. And Jordan just said, well, I don't think the logical end of that is anarchism, but he didn't say another alternative. I'd love to hear another alternative. I've been searching for years for another alternative. The last thing in the world I wanted to be was an anarchist. I came to this view kicking and screaming. I'm just finishing up my my hair here. Getting it all curled up. I have a county affiliate meeting tonight where I'm giving a talk on the meaning of the Libertarian Pledge. Okay, let me unplug that to let that cool down. Let's take a look at comments. Yeah, we certainly will not, let me go over here. We certainly will not see this kind of insight on CNN. That's for certain. And I see Charles keeps using the word chaos. I don't think that word means what you think it means, or I don't know what you see as the applicability here, because nobody is advocating chaos. Is this getting flagged as harmful or extremist? Made it. Okay, so let's continue.
Go ahead. Talk about humor.
If they're
and truth.
using manipulative tactics in order to further their goal, as opposed to rational discourse, as you and I having, we're putting our cards on the table. If you're using things like deceptive editing and, you know, characterizing things out of context, you're not owed a rational, fair response. You're not acting as a decent, fair actor. So humor is very useful in this mechanism because it explodes not only the particular thing you're saying, but your role as someone who's worthy of courtesy, respect, and decorum.
And it froze. I think that's the last clip though, but he gave my trigger word, decorum. That's going to be a word I hate from this day forward because I have seen how it can be used to bludgeon people. And I've been thinking a bit, and I might do, I'd like to, let me get out of this screen because I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. 1 second here. I think that was the last clip. Okay, yeah, that was the last clip. On the whole decorum issue. JJ, a friend of mine, brought this up, but I had already been in this type of social anthropological discussion before, back when I was doing Christian apologetics, believe it or not, where you're dealing with some anti-Christian people who weren't coming at the arguments in good faith, and how effective ridicule is when you're dealing with bad faith actors, no matter what the thing is you're arguing about, religion, whatever. That bad faith actors deserve ridicule, and ridicule can be the most powerful of weapons. But the decorum warriors do not think ridicule is ever appropriate. And that's a problem, because it's also, funny enough, the decorum warriors tend to be the more SJW types. But they do not realize how culturally Caucasian-centric our ideas of decorum are. Let me give you an example. In many black communities, in the urban area, there is something called playing the dozens. And it's a rite of passage, and it's also a symbol of entrance into masculinity, where you can out-barb somebody through words. You can be more clever with the put-downs. And that is actually considered the gentlemanly way to fight, that anyone who resorts to actual violence has shown they are the big pussy. So there's a lot of cultural baggage that comes along with this. So there's a lot of classism because, again, this hoity-toity decorum, do you think that this is the way the pecking order or politeness is established in poorer communities who don't have the luxury of that? No. So it is very, very snobbish, both Caucasian-centric and upper middle class centric. Well, you want to know what? I am Caucasian. I'll give you that. But I don't come from the upper middle class. That's not the way I grew up. That's not the pecking order, nor the decorum that I was raised with. And to be punished for having a different cultural background also is pretty damn rich coming from that particular wing of the Libertarian Party. And any good old-fashioned Southern belle can tell you that she could cut you down to size in the most polite words possible. So if we're not trying to get to what people are actually saying, rather than getting hung up on these social norms and conventions, we are Pharisees of the first order and huffing our own farts. This whole decorum thing on the LNC has, to me, revealed a very elitist mindset that needs to go, needs to die in a fire. And that's why a lot of these people had a lot of problems with Maj Touré, because he did not speak their language. He comes from the hood, and that's his culture. And we don't need to be the great white savior that's going to save ethnic people from their minority communities' cultures. Or ours is so much better. I mean, come on, talk about an imperialistic mindset. So let me go back to comments here. I really need to hook back up my trackball. Like working with this laptop, you know, the little thingy, you know, where you're doing it with the pad. I have an old MacBook Air and it's not always working properly. Okay, going through the comments here. Okay, I think I got through these. David Burnham said the interview was atrocious. I really enjoyed it. I'm not so sure they came to an understanding, but the interplay between the two, I really, really enjoyed it. And Joy, I'm glad you see the elitist mindset that I do as well. And it does show in the way they speak or don't speak to members. Like the way it's treated, that these delusion member emails are a bother. And that they don't take any credence at all to the number of emails. Let me tell you, when they were trying to remove me, they got about 900 emails in opposition. They didn't care. Because they're in their echo chamber where they know better. They are completely tone deaf as to what the average rank and file libertarian thinks of them. They like the titles. They like being called former senator. They like all of that and this faux respect and genuflection. I don't come from that. I come from a much more hard Scrabble background, and I've kept that with me. And that kind of hard Scrabble background has, oh, I see, David. The left, oh, I got you. Sorry. Let me clarify. David Burnham was saying the awful interview was the one he had with that journalist, that lady, Kathy Newman. That was a terrible interview. But I loved when he got her in the, why do you feel you have the right to offend me? And she just like, the hamster wheel froze. and he's like, got ya. Yeah. So sorry, David, that I misunderstood you. So yeah, the LNC cannot accept me for my rough around the edges. They expect me to change, to put my pinky out while I'm drinking my teacup. And tell me that that is not really presumptuous. And I think that needs to change. It's very, very elitist. And I find it phony as shit. I find that phony politeness at all costs, no matter what you're feeling, and then you never really know what people are feeling because they won't tell you because they're too concerned about how it might appear. That's false. And what this world is looking for is authenticity. I want people to tell me what they're thinking. I don't want them to sugarcoat it in flowery words. But yeah, that is exactly the problem they had with Maj Toure. Now, I had some issues with Maj Toure. I thought him telling off our biggest donor was just being a dick. But that was just being a dick. I mean, you can be an elitist dick, you could be a hood dick, you could be a white trash dick, you could be a whatever, lower middle class. He was just being a dick. But in general, they had just a lot of problems with his demeanor, which is a product of his upbringing. They have a lot of problems with my demeanor, which is a product of my upbringing. My dad was a drug-dealing bookie. That's what I grew up. And I'm sorry, not sorry. Why should I have to change for you? Because you want to put on airs and act like you're important? You're not no more important than the average member. And that's why the average member tends to like me and not you. Okay, everyone. I am going to get going, getting ready again for a county affiliate meeting. I thought this was a great discussion, quite fascinating, and my laptop's about to die, so I won't give a long outro. Bye-bye, everyone. I'm glad I caught it before it died. You have an awesome night.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they